gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage Teresa Steele-Schober and Roger Dixon, who are going to give us insight into an area of minerals governance that has become so important. Well, in fact, it's always been important, but the reason why we're speaking about it a lot at the moment is that the codes and the standards, the guidelines that Teresa and Roger will talk about have recently been going through big changes to make sure that sustainability or ESG are fully incorporated into them, which therefore means that even if you're a nerdy geologist like myself, it's not just the rocks that you care about. You're also paying great respect and taking great interest in what are the different aspects with regards to the environment, society, and of course governance that all need to be considered when we're saying, okay, yes, I think I might have some material in the ground that we could go ahead and extract. So with that, please put your hands together for a round of applause to the fantastic Teresa and Roger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll kick off and then Teresa will come in later. We're going to give you an update on the CRIRSCO ESG Global Subcommittee. And before I start, I better explain the acronym CRIRSCO. That stands for the Committee for Mineral Reserves International Reporting Standards. And currently we have 14 members representing individual countries and regions around the world. And CRIRSCO has an international reporting template for the public reporting of exploration targets, exploration results, mineral resources, and mineral reserves. And it integrates the minimum standards adopted in national and regional reporting codes and standards worldwide. One glaring omission from our membership is the People's Republic of China, which I think you will agree will play an important part in the supply of critical raw materials. We have been working with China for more than, believe it or not, for 14 years. And to get them on board, we have been successful in getting them to develop a CRIRSCO-aligned reporting code, but we are still awaiting official government confirmation of the application of that code. The global ESG subcommittee was formed post the CRIRSCO annual meeting in 2021. That was a virtual meeting. And we held our first global meeting on the 20th of November 2021. So we've been going for quite a while. And as you can imagine, it's quite difficult putting together a global meeting. People in Vancouver just getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and people in Melbourne, Australia, who it's very late at night. And so we've adapted to that, and we have East and West meetings, and that seems to work better. And some of our members are obviously fairly advanced in terms of ESG or sustainability, and others are not. And CRIRSCO itself is a follower rather than a leader. So it takes or integrates best practice from members and revises the CRIRSCO template accordingly. And it's planned to update the template on a 5-year basis. And the last update was in November 2019. However, in the case of ESG, some jurisdictions lead and others obviously want to follow. And CRIRSCO felt that it was important to keep every member in the loop, and thus the global subcommittee. And as you will all well know, the subcommittee was never short of guidance on this topic. And we've gathered documentation from more than 100 organizations around the world, which have given guidance to people on what they should be doing about ESG. Throughout this plethora of documentation, there is no clear definition of ES and G. And in particular, there's no common definition of G, of the G for governance. And that is what has taken up a lot of the time in our subcommittee. Was it supposed to be corporate governance, or was it national governance, or was it governance related only to a mineral project? The first task that we took on was therefore to accurately define what exactly is ESG in terms of public reporting of a mineral project, and bearing in mind that there are various stages of a mineral project, going from early exploration through project development, project operation, and project closure. So we have to cover the ESG in all those phases. The meetings have continued on a quarterly basis since 21, and we've given obviously feedback to our CRIRSCO executive in October at their annual meeting in Johannesburg. Since that meeting, we've left the nitty-gritty to the experts, led by Teresa, and they have formed a more focused working group, and Teresa will update you on their work.
Thanks, Roger. So just to build on that, I think the whole objective of the work streams that are progressing is really taking this plethora of information, as Roger says, and trying to distill it down to what it means for mineral resource and reserve reporting. Minister Ghani's comments just now really resonate with the work that we're doing, because our objective is to achieve exactly what she's looking for, and that's to build trust between the mining companies and their investors and other stakeholders, of course, and national governments are obviously significant stakeholders in mineral projects. And the only way to build that trust is to be transparent and for mining companies to accurately reflect on the ESG considerations or ESG factors relating to their projects. Whilst sustainability reporting happens in many sectors and many large companies are already publishing sustainability reports, the challenge that we've been trying to address is how do you take that information and distill it down to what it means for the purposes of a public report or a competent persons or qualified persons report. And so to do that, that's why these definitions have been important. And now we actually had a meeting earlier today where we presented our draft definitions to the broader ESG subcommittee. And we're now working on a more detailed work plan on how to take amendments to the CRIRSCO template forward. There's a number of other work streams happening globally in parallel to the CRIRSCO discussions. There's an update to JORC, which I think most people are aware of, is in the pipeline, and we're waiting for them to be in a position where they can undertake the peer review of the updates that they are proposing. The PERC 2021 update included ESG. The SAM codes, which is the South African Mineral Reporting Committee, is busy updating their code and their supporting guideline on ESG. The SAM codes had in terms of countries, it had the first ESG guideline that attempted to try and more discreetly integrate ESG into mineral reporting. And so what we're trying to do in this process is make explicit what has been embedded in the mineral resource and reserve reporting processes all along, but hasn't necessarily been executed in a way that has provided investors with information that they need to evaluate the resources and the reserves effectively. There's nuances to this process, and I'll build on the theme of being nerds and rock nerds, and there's obviously technical definitions associated with what is a mineral reserve and what is a mineral resource. And suffice to say, for the purposes of this call, particularly environmental and social factors can influence the success or failure of a mineral project. And so we're trying to reflect and provide guidance to people globally on how they can do this better, using a lot of information that's actually already available. It's the so what does this mean question that needs to be answered from the huge range of mineral resource information, or sorry, sustainability information that is already out there. Yeah, so that's where we are at the moment. We, as I say, the next meeting of the ESG working group, it all gets a bit complicated with different levels, but the ESG working group sort of is a group of 6 of us who are the engine room, I suppose, of the ESG subcommittee. We bash our heads together and have the debates and the discussions, and then come up with concepts that the ESG subcommittee discusses and debates before going broader. So we at the point now where we need to come up with our next steps and detailed work plan, and that will be looking at where we would make recommendations to enhancements to the CRIRSCO code or the CRIRSCO template, including all aspects, the table 1 part of it, which is sort of more detailed checklist on what must be included in these reports, as well as the upfront mineral reporting requirements. So happy to take any questions if we need to.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Teresa and Roger, for that fantastic update, really, with regards to what's going on in the world of acronyms. So yes, we will be playing a form of bingo. So we've had CRIRSCO, JORC, PERC, etc. Over the course of the last 15 minutes or so. Let's keep them coming. And don't worry, for those of you who are thinking, what on earth are they talking about? We shall endeavour to explain what these acronyms actually mean within the chat. So we'll try and make sure that everybody comes along with the discussion as well. So with regards to this, and my heart goes out to both of you with regards to the multiple committees, the time zones, the hierarchy, etc. Do we have an expected timeline in terms of when these updates will be in place and being used? And I know that, for example, in South Africa, for many years now, that's when the kind of one of the earliest updates happened in terms of really making sure that the ESG aspects were truly material, I guess, within the reporting. But is there some shape of a timeline that's happening, kind of globally?
So I think we can't talk on behalf of the Australians. I know that they've had hiccups with their process, and it's progressing. I think they would admit that they would have liked to have been further than where they are at the moment, but factors are not always, haven't been within their control. So I won't make a comment on their behalf. In terms of the SAM codes process, the South African process, I'm actively involved there, as you know, Sarah, and today has been, I've had all the meetings all in one day. So I've been jumping between all of these committees today. And suffice to say, there's sort of pretty advanced drafts on the South African side, but probably towards the end of the year, we'll be in a position to circulate publicly. And I would like to suggest that from CRIRSCO, the next CRIRSCO AGM is in October. I said to Roger earlier, it would be great to say that I think we'll have something final by then, but I'm not entirely sure. But hopefully we have it sort of tied up in a bow by next year's CRIRSCO AGM at the latest. So we need to sort of work out the schedules. But I think a lot of these documents are going to collide at fairly similar, within sort of months of each other. All of these will be coming out for public comment.
I mean, I think it's really exciting that this is beginning. Well, I mean, it's not the case that it's never been there. As Roger and yourself said, Teresa, ESG has always been part of these codes. It maybe just hasn't had the oomph to say, no, this is really, really important with regards to what's being reported. But one of the aspects, Teresa, you spoke about was that the purpose of this governance that's there is to make sure that there's that level of transparency and then, of course, trust between that exploration or that mining company and their investor. Am I correct in saying that that's the kind of, if you're looking for the primary parties that we're trying to get to understand and say, okay, yeah, I understand what you're doing, are the companies themselves who are undertaking, say, the exploration and their investor? Is that the primary communication route, or is it broader than that?
I'm going to be a typical geologist and say it's broader. However, that's the main point. So the purpose of CRIRSCO originated, and Roger can give the history if needed, but CRIRSCO is there to give investors in mining companies surety that the information that's being presented is an accurate reflection of the rocks that are actually in the ground. And so we're certainly building on that. However, investors and stakeholders who have an interest in this are broader than just the sort of enterprise, the large enterprise investors at the moment. So all stakeholders surrounding mining projects, whether it be the community next door, the farmer 100 kilometers away, NGOs, people with interests in commodities and impacts, the critical minerals associations and critical minerals industries and bodies, all of those entities have a justifiable vested interest in what the mining companies are doing, and they are all relevant stakeholders. And mining companies have a number of ways of communicating information. And in the mineral reporting space, we're not trying to duplicate that. And I think it's very important for people to understand. The corporate sustainability reports that companies will publish in terms of the Global Reporting Initiative or any of the other frameworks, those are still very important, and those disclosures still need to happen. But what we're trying to do is say, okay, but how does that affect your ability to extract the material that's in the ground, and what does that mean for your ability to extract it responsibly? And just to give a practical example, if you are a responsible mining company and you have realized that you can only sell your commodity into the European Union, for example, if you're able to demonstrate your ESG credentials, then you may implement mitigation measures that are perhaps stricter than what the legal requirements in your host country mandates. And that might mean advanced water treatment technology, for example. That means that your cost to produce your commodity is going to be greater than your next door neighbor who doesn't necessarily follow the same standards. That means when you prepare your financial model to determine the NPV of your project, you've got greater hurdles to overcome in terms of demonstrating that your project is economically viable. At the end of the day, there's a whole lot of economic theory, and people have commented on whether or not green commodities are going to attract a premium and all of that. I'm not even going to go down that road for these purposes. But what we're trying to do is get everyone on a level playing field. So we say, okay, understand what your risks and your impacts are, and from there manage them responsibly so that everybody is sort of the playing field level increases. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Great, thank you for that, Teresa. And actually, with regards to that, so Eva is going to be joining us to give a talk very shortly, which Eva, by the way, might be sooner than you anticipate, because Katie's just had to nip out to take a call. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But Teresa and Roger, I've got one final question just to pass to you that comes from Hayden from Geologize. It's in the Q&A if you want to take a look at it. And Hayden asks, he says, many companies are helping mining companies communicate with their investors, but they face a fundamental challenge when it comes to mass communication or communicating with impacted communities because the public don't trust mining companies. Period, he says. The validity of what is being said is unimportant and who is saying it. How do we square this circle? Now, Teresa, you began to tiptoe into that. So therefore, I've just thrown the question unashamedly at you.
I think it's really difficult because you you have to build up the communication and the relationship and the trust over a period of time. And what you find happens very quickly within mining projects is as soon as there's an event of misinformation, intentionally or unintentionally communicated, that trust breaks down, and suddenly the communities are saying, oh, well, I can't trust you because last time you said it was this and this time it's actually that. And so to bring it back to what CRIRSCO is trying to achieve is the preparation or the presentation and disclosure of factual information that readers of the reports can then use to make their own assessment of risks. Just to give another example, the different companies have different risk appetites and tolerances, which Sarah can lecture us all on until the cows come home. But for one mining company, working in close proximity, for example, to a World Heritage site may be considered a higher risk than for other companies. But what we'd like to see is that all mining companies disclose the information to say, well, our project happens to be on the border of a World Heritage site. Then the reader of that information can make their informed assessment of, oh, do I think these guys are going to do a good job of managing it, or actually that's a no-go for me. So yeah, sorry, I'm going a bit in circles, but it is a difficult answer to give because it's a long-term relationship that needs to be established right from the beginning, and that builds up and builds on trust going forward.
So if I can just add to that, I mean, the three principles of all the reporting codes is transparency, materiality, and competency. And if you take the first one, transparency, and we're not talking as we used to do in the old days of informing only the shareholders, the mining industry informs all its stakeholders. And you have to be transparent right from the start with all those stakeholders through all the phases of the mining project. And that's a fundamental difference. And you know, to say that communities don't trust the mining companies, I think that that may be right, but it's changing very quickly.